We only have 1 hour, so I want to get started as quickly as possible. Make sure that you are on mute. This training, will be recorded, just so you know. At the end of the training, a link to the video will be posted on YouTube and an email will go out. Mara will take care of reporting your names. And sorry, someone was joining in. Make sure that when you are joining, once you join in the chat box, that you list your name and where you are, what district you're from, and one word that comes to mind when you hear the word conservation. If you have any questions throughout the training, please utilize the chat box. Someone will be monitoring that. And then we will go over those questions at that time. Okay, it's 9:01. The weight room looks like it's slowed down a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Kathy Shamblin from the Employees Association at the Hanover Caroline office is going to do some introductions.
Good morning, everyone. We have 3 speakers today that are going to talk about the legacy planning for farm and forest owners. I'd like to introduce Andrew Fontinos. He's currently a forest conservation specialist with the Virginia Department of Forestry. He services Salem and the western portion of Virginia. We also have Bill Worrell with the Southwest District Forestry and Natural Resources agent. He is an agent for the Virginia Cooperative Extension, the Southwest version of Adam Downing, who I will introduce in just a moment. And Adam is he works for the Forestry and Natural Resources Extension agent, serving the Virginia Cooperative Extension in the Northern District, which covers 28 counties, which is generally described as the Northern Piedmont and Shenandoah Valley area. They will have this contact information at the end with the notes. Should you have any questions for them and you want to speak with them one-on-one, or have any anything that you need to speak with them about, emails and phone numbers will be provided. Oh, I said, with all that being said, we'll get Andrew to get us started on our training. Thanks.
All right. Adam, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? All right, great. Well, hello, gang. Good morning, and thanks for being here with us today. I'm, delighted to have a chance to talk with y'all. I'm going to be doing a little context setting, borrowing from the presentations that we give to landowners a couple times a year when we do seminars on this Generation Next topic. So you'll get a little bit of a taste of the context we often start out with when we do those programs. Let me can everyone see a PowerPoint presentation? Adam's giving me a thumbs up. Okay. So just to start off, the Department of Forestry does do a lot of different things, and one of them is conserve our forest land base, which that's sort of area of focus that my job falls within in this program matter. Forest conservation has a small team at Department of Forestry, but this type of program where we're talking to lots of landowners lets us have a big impact. That's our fancy Generation Next logo for some of this topic information we've got. Okay, so as I mentioned, my goal here is to set a little context, describe our forest resource, talk about conservation tools and trends. Just to start us off, looking at a map of Virginia right now with the green forested area shown, it's about 62% of the state. The low happened around 1900 when we think approximately 14 million acres, about 50%. There was a steady increase up until the 1970s, where we hit about 16.4 million, and then we've lost about 500,000 acres of forest over the last 50 years. And the trend is we continue to urbanize in some areas, is continued loss, sort of a steady and slow continued loss of some forests. So that's, you know, one of the things that drives our agency and program to talk to people and do something about forest loss. These are some, you know, super facts we've taken from the UVA Weldon Cooper Center study from 2017. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that and use it to talk about ag and forestry programs. You know, I like to point out that study found 1 in 40 workers in the state had a job that was directly related to or secondarily related to the timber and forest industry, forest products industry. 1 in 40. So that was more than I thought it would be. There's also recreation and ecosystem benefits, you know, worth a whole heck of a lot of money for our forest. Okay, you're now looking at another map that the thing I'd like to point out on this one is we're going to be talking about, you know, our client base, family forest landowners. They own 2/3 of Virginia's total forest area. So they are the dark green area in there. The public land is mostly that brownish, reddish color, but fully 2/3 of the forest area in Virginia is owned by family forest, and 75% of the timber supply in Virginia is owned by those families. A lot of that public land, you know, is ridge tops and other places unsuitable. So, you know, fully 3/4 of the timber supply is controlled by family forest owners. Most of those owners are families and not TMOs or not timber management organizations or other corporate interests, but families and our clients that we work with day to day. They're facing the same kind of unprecedented intergenerational transfer that, you know, other agricultural owners are facing. Most of them are over the age of 55, and a lot of them are over the age of 65. You know, another trend, you know, I'd like to point out is we're seeing more and more fragmentation across the state, and you know, which gets us thinking, what can we do about this? You know, less than 100 acres is not an enormous forest, and 95% of those owners who are controlling all that timber supply in the state, you know, most of them own less than 100 acres. It becomes difficult to plan, make a sustainable, you know, income off of a crop of trees that you only harvest every 60 to 80 years for hardwoods. You know, a 60 to 80 year crop rotation when it's less than 100 acres and you only have one crop to do at a time. As landowners age, and are faced with rising costs with taxes and other, you know, costs of owning land, you know, there's sort of process that we see take place where land gets subdivided, parceled up, you know, then fragmented into different owners as they pass it on to their children or sell off lots to pay bills, etc. And then when you have even smaller lots, there's a real, you know, the real threat of converting it just to a residential use only. You know, the ag and forest use is lost when the lots are so small, or just having a whole bunch of different owners splitting up a farm, you know, each one doing what they want. You stop losing that farming and forest productivity. So it gets converted to some other kind of use. Yeah, all those economic and environmental benefits of having a forest or a farm, they get smaller as the parcels get smaller. So this is just a graphic showing that. I mean, you guys, this is the kind of thing we're seeing in most counties where, you know, development, there's a lot of people moving in. You know, you lose the ability to manage that forest that's left. There's still some forest left, but and it still counts as, part of that acreage we're showing as, Virginia's forest resource. But once you've got all these homes in here, you're not going to have logging trucks. You're not going to have management activity. You lose the productivity and the benefits to society that come along with that. So now, I've hit you with the sort of, what are the things we're dealing with, and why do I have a job, and why am I here, and how do I work with landowners, and what am I talking to them about? And now we're going to move into the tools that I sort of use. These are the 5 main tools that we're working with as an agency when we approach landowners. Sort of in a way, these are in the order that we use them the most. So forest stewardship management plans is our number one way to engage with folks. That's, you guys may be more familiar with sort of the agricultural plans or, farming best management plans than the forest plans. But, so we're trying to tell them, what have they got? What condition is it in? And what are their options to manage it for the next 10 to 15 years? So when we write these plans, they're 10 to 15 year plans with management recommendations, mapping, growth, soils information. And we try to engage, more than just the current owner, because as I mentioned earlier, the rotation on these trees, is at least 40 years, and for hardwoods, 80 to 100 even. And it's a multi-generation approach. If they're going to succeed in growing a healthy forest, harvesting part of it, regrowing part of it, it's going to take more than one generation. So those plans are critically important. Without a plan, it doesn't usually just happen when you leave a forest. When you have a managed forest that's been managed for 100 years and you just stop managing it one day, it does not generally produce great results for the next generation coming along. The next 2, I've got land use and ag and forest districts. Those are, tax-based tools that we encourage people to take advantage of and help them, understand and get applied for. You guys are familiar with those, so I won't spend some time talking about that. But the land use tax for forestry is particularly important because they're not getting, yearly returns on their investment there, and high tax rate every year they're paying that is a disincentive to keep that land a forest. And they're trying to think, I got to pay these bills, I better find a different way to, I better clear these trees, or I better do something different in order to pay these bills. I work, the department, our agency works with conservation easements, and we also do a lot of referrals to other land trusts and other groups for folks who are interested in doing some kind of permanent protection. That's something that can be done to protect their farm, to permanently reduce development potential on a tract. And we often use, and when our program does it, we lock in forest use as, so we'll have like 75 or 80% permanent forest retention built into the easement. So the current owner and every owner afterward would be locked into, keeping 75, 80% of the property a forest, a working forest that can be harvested, but, must be regrown. So when, we're really looking for people who are focused on keeping a land a forest, because that's the best use of that property. That's just a voluntary program that's really available to anyone, and I'm a good point of contact for that. Lastly, Century Forest is something that is relatively new, so maybe not everyone on the call has heard about it. The state forester and the Secretary of Ag and Forestry decided to create a program that was modeled after The Century Farm program has the same kind of requirements where you have to prove continuous ownership for over 100 years. And, you know, it's a recognition program, doesn't lock your land into anything, but it's an encouragement and a recommendation that you had to put a lot of investment and work into keeping that in the family and you know, undeveloped for 100 years, and encourage you to keep going. We give signs and you get on a registry, same sort of deal. Last slide here before I turn it over to Adam. This shows those tools I was just talking about and how they fit into our goals with working with landowners. And you know, the goals are up at the top of the chart: keeping land intact, keeping land in forest, and keeping land in the family. And the tools are over on the left-hand side. You can see that most of the tools we're working with just really aren't designed to keep a property in the family. I mean, how can you lock that in? So that, you know, that's the reason that we've gotten into this business of talking to people about their legacy, talking to people about, you know, you need to talk to a lawyer, you need to get your will and your estate plan in order. And part of your estate plan needs to be a forest management plan. It all works together. If you don't have that communication with a lawyer and you're working on your estate plan, yeah, you can keep your land intact and in forest, but there's only so much the Department of Forestry can do to help you keep it in the family. That's something that we're trying to empower them to take on themselves, get in touch with an attorney and the other professionals they'll need, and get that plan. So we're going to spend the rest of the talk, you know, talking about what is that legacy planning and how are we approaching people to get them, to encourage them to do it. Now I'm going to unshare my screen. Again, yeah, contact me if you want to. Oh, there, I found it. Contact me if you, you know, want to discuss anything further. Adam?
Thanks, Andrew. That was a very good job setting the stage. Appreciate that very much. Actually, Bill is up next. He's going to share a story and talk about what we call essential documents, and then I'll wrap things up.
Okay, I'm Bill Worrell, and I'm going to talk a little bit. I don't have any slides to show you, but I'm going to talk through a few things. The one thing I have put up on the screen, I think you can see if I shared it correctly, is information on a new publication that our group had been putting together for a few years now, and it actually just recently came out as an extension publication, but it's a legacy planning, a guide for Virginia landowners. And that's a resource that's available on the Virginia Cooperative Extension webpage as a download. You can download that as a PDF file, and Adam may talk more later. We also have some print copies of that. But I'm going to talk to you about what sometimes happens when we go to transitioning land, and specifically what happens when we don't plan the transition. The other thing that's apparent if we get to looking around is sometimes what happens with one farm impacts all the farms in that neighborhood or that community, that area of the county. And that's what I'm going to talk about is, you know, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a really large farm family in a rural county of Southwest Virginia. They didn't really do much transition planning. I'm actually not sure if they had anything written down. But, you know, when they passed, it really turned into a huge mess. And, you know, they had at least 12 kids. There were at least a dozen kids involved. And when you get that many kids, you know, the age difference between them, so you can imagine all the different things going on. But they had lots of problems. And since it was a working farm, none of the kids were really making a living off the farm, but they were running cattle, maybe growing just a few crops, but mainly forages with pasture and hayland. And of course, you know, they all grew up with maybe raising a few pigs and some other animals that they would use for personal use. Well, what happened is when it started time to try to start planning what we're going to do with the land, that many people couldn't agree on anything. So they had lots of disputes. The other issue there is, all of you know, if you don't continue to manage the landscape, Mother Nature is going to take care of it for you. So some of the kids continued to run some cattle, to run some livestock, and to continue to do some of the work on the farm. But that made some of the other siblings extremely upset because they didn't think anyone should be using the farm since, it was all still up in the air as to whose it was. So there were lots of family disputes, lots of interesting things that happened, and many times the police were called to come in and settle disputes and to calm them down. So, and it took over a decade to settle that. So with what happened with that farm family impacted all of the neighbors in that community. So there was another farm family, they owned a little over 100 acres, but the gentleman there did not want to see 10 acres lotted out to all of his 10 kids. He didn't want to see, his farm turned into 10 different parcels of 10 or so acres. So what they wanted to do was to get one of the kids to buy the farm out and hopefully continue to manage the farm in some way. The issue there was, with that many kids, most of them dispersed and were living nowhere near the area. So there were a couple of kids in the area. So they just had to talk one of them into buying the farm. And that gets interesting because, if one of them has an interest in doing so, how do you come up with a fair sale price? If you get too high of a price, it puts too much a burden onto the person buying the land. And then ultimately, will they fail and end up selling part of it or all of it? So that became an issue, but they were able to get one of the kids to buy the farm, continue to try to manage the landscape and do some farming. But they was able to keep the land intact and in the family. There was another joining landowner, another neighbor in that community, and they kind of did things different. The one good thing that came out in the end is, the kids, none of them were really fighting over the land. None of them wanted it, but they all wanted the most dollar they could get for it. So the thing they wanted to do was to try to sell it intact and as one parcel. So, they tried to sell it to some cousins and relatives and distant relatives, but they couldn't agree on price. So in order to get the most value out of it, they ended up selling to an out-of-state landowner, someone from a big urban city who wanted a weekend farm and getaway. So that property was sold in entirety to one landowner, and actually it worked out, I guess, fairly well because that land is still basically in one ownership and still mostly farm and forest. There was another family, another joining landowner and neighbor in that community that kind of went in a much different way. They saw firsthand all of the fussing and fighting with the original family I was telling you about, and they decided they didn't want their kids to fight over anything. They decided they didn't want to give the opportunity for the kids to fight over anything. So they went to town and worked with an attorney, and they basically set it up that when they passed, the attorney's office handled everything. The attorney's office served as the executor of the estate. They brought in appraisers, and they appraised and valued everything. I mean everything, the contents of the house, everything, and everything was to be sold at public auction and all the proceeds divided evenly among their heirs. So the big thing they did was they didn't want their kids fussing and fighting and calling the police on one another. The downside to that is, if one of the kids wanted Granny Cedar chest, they had to buy it at public auction. The other thing is, when you go to determining the most value and getting the most value, the property often gets parcelized. It gets put into smaller acreages and sold to multiple owners, and that's what happened with that property. And that was about a 300-acre property. And since a state road went through one corner of the property, it made it easy for that attorney's office to have a surveyor put together a plan for multiple lots. So when that was sold at auction, it ended up being sold to multiple owners and over the last couple of decades, that went from one parcel, one farm family to 10 or 12 different landowners now, and there's 8 or 10 homes currently on that property. There are some still reasonable acreages, but it's nothing like what it was originally. So that property did get dispersed. It got cut up and lotted out, and with multiple ownerships. So the future management of that farm is much different. And that's the challenge. But I just wanted to share a few stories of what happened in one section of one county in Southwest Virginia, and how one family's transition or lack of transition impacted all of their neighbors. And there are still people around that sometimes talk about some of those funny tales and stories that went on. The key point there is in the process, our Generation Next workshops that we do, our publication, there's lots of things in the publication that can help guide landowners through the process of how to start planning for their transition. And the big thing is open and honest communication from the owners of the property with their heirs, with their kids, and to honestly talk about what the kids want to do with the property, honestly how they feel about it, and how they cherish it in their memory of the property, and what they want to do with the property for the future. So that's the key, is a lot of communication with the families. The other part of my talk, I wanted to talk specifically about essential documents. In the publication, there's a few pages that specifically addresses essential documents that you need when you start your transition and planning process. And contrary to what most of us think, it's a whole lot more than just a last will and testament. That's just part of what you need. But if the owners of the land can put together a lot of these documents prior to meeting with attorneys, they can save themselves lots of money. But basically, lots of things that you need, they need an overview of their property and estate. They need to put together any management plans they have, whether that's forest management plans or grazing plans and other plans they have for the property. Put together a document that has, the list of responsible parties. Who does what on your land? Who's responsible for doing different things and different management on your property? Other things to include there are, pertinent information such as land deeds, any leases, if the property has any hunting leases, or if part of the property is leased to other farmers or other people. Another important document there are conservation easements, if there's any conservation easements on the property. Tax assessed values, land use valuation, those type of things. Also, if you happen to be in part of the area where there's mineral rights, if there's gas, oil, or coal under the property, any information about mineral rights, if that was separated from the deed. The other documents that are needed in this whole planning process are any advanced medical directives that the parents or the owners of the land have put in place. Another real key one there is a durable power of attorney. That's a very important document. And then another specific document, and it's part of the worksheet in the workbook that we have, is the identification of your heirs. Go through a process of identifying who are heirs to your property and heirs to your estate. And of course, the biggest and the most important one that most people think about is the last will and testament. But again, that's just one of the many documents that landowners need to have together when they sit down to start preparing their transition plan. And again, if you look at our publication, there's step-by-step guides throughout that can help people walk through the process and get together information. There's also worksheets in there that the landowners can work through to help them determine some of what they need or help them determine some of these things. But, people sometimes don't plan because they don't want to spend money. They're afraid it's going to cost them a fortune. And of course, good estate planning is probably not going to be cheap. But if the landowners will go through this workbook that we have and put together a lot of this stuff, they can put together things and have them ready. So when they go to meeting with that estate planning attorney, you've got stuff already in hand, and you can save time and save money that the attorney won't walk through and try to help you create these things if you already have some of them in place. So I think I've probably run to the end of my time there, Adam, and I'll transition back to you.
Thanks, Bill. Well done. Appreciate you, Bill, and Andrew setting a great stage here. Really appreciate everyone that's jumped in to be part of this this hour this morning. Good rainy day for it. See some familiar names, and it's nice to see you. It would be great if we were actually face to face and seeing each other and catching up on some other things. If you haven't already, go ahead and put in the chat one word that comes to mind when I say the word conservation. So everyone here is some sort of a conservation professional. And in fact, many of your organizations have the word conservation in it. So what comes to your mind with the word conservation? And I'm going to go ahead and jump into my part of this presentation, and we will hopefully have some time to have some discussion, question and answer. And feel free, by the way, if anything does come to mind, go ahead and put that in the chat, and we'll try to keep track of it, or the association folks on the back end of this will keep track of it if we lose it further up in the chat. All righty. So I hope to, I'm a fan of alliteration, so forgive me here, but I hope we can instigate, inspire, and inform you, and keep doing that to work in this arena, and to give you a little bit of equipment too, such as that publication, but also just some other resources. I've always loved this when I saw this cartoon of Snoopy, but this kind of captures it. Here, Charlie Brown is instigating the conversation. Someday we'll all die, Snoopy. And gosh, I forget the dog's name. That's terrible. Snoopy. Yeah, Snoopy. Not enough coffee yet this morning. Snoopy says, yep, but on the other days we'll not. So he's inspiring, and together they can go ahead and continue that conversation. So let's start with a couple questions for you. So put this answer in the chat, just A, B, C, D, or E. To what extent do you agree that it is very important for a landowner to plan for their land legacy? And thank you. I see some words in there. I'm seeing some answers to this question. Okay, thank you, Marta. That's, I don't know how many A's you got there, but I guess that's a very, very, very strongly agree. All right, great. So the same answer choices to this next question. To what extent do you agree that natural resource professionals are critical in the legacy planning arena, the stuff that we're talking about? Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree? A, B, C, D, or E? Okay. Seeing some pretty positives on both of those questions, which is not surprising. You've selected to be here today, volunteered to be here today. So I've got some good news and some bad news. Let's start with the bad news. We've got to get out of our comfort zone with this stuff, right? And this is true for all of us, Bill, Andrew, and others who have been involved in this for a number of years. It's not comfortable stuff. The bottom line is people are messy, and families are even more messy. And it's not our arena, our expertise. We are subject matter experts. And the good news is we don't have to be experts on this subject matter. We have a trusted relationship with people because we are subject matter experts in the realm of conservation, forestry, agriculture, water quality, whatever. And so we don't have to know much. And when I got that mindset for myself, I'm like, okay, we can step into this. So I believe that our best role, our key role, because we are trusted resource professionals in our communities, is to instigate the conversation. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it also doesn't mean it has to be hard. And it can be as simple as asking a few questions. So while we read these, pick one of those that you think you might be able to utilize in a conversation. So imagine yourself out on a farm, and you're talking about a watering system, or fencing out a creek or whatever, and you're standing looking at something on the farm, and you're looking for an opening. Maybe you can ask one of these questions. What do you think about the future of this place? Are your children interested in this place? What do you want to have happen with this property? How do you envision this property? Putting, along something that's beyond their lifespan, whoever you're talking to, in that sentence, 100 years, 200 years. So then there's a multitude of other questions. These are my words. You can come up with some of your own words. And thank you for engaging with us in the chat. I'm watching some of the answers here. That's great. So you start the conversation, you might hear some things like, well, I already have a will, and that'll take care of my stuff. And Bill's already touched on this. Andrew has too. A will only takes care of the stuff. It does not take care of the ethic. And so if the landowner has an ethic they want to pass on, where the land is managed in a certain way, kept open, those sort of things, that takes more than just a piece of paper that says who gets what. Or maybe they say, well, I'm only, fill in the blank. I got plenty of time. And we all think we do, but of course we know we have no guarantees tomorrow. And my personal favorite, and Bill alluded to this, I'm a cheapskate, so I'd be like, well, it's just too expensive. Can't afford it. And as Bill said, there is going to be some expense involved to do a good job with this, but it can be significantly reduced by doing some planning ahead of time. So what are some of the planning strategies that are often used? These are not the best ones, but they are often used. Pass the buck, let someone else take care of it. A paperless trust. We're going to trust the kids to do the right thing. Or you justify it with any number of things. And for those of you who are fans of equations, here's one for you. NP equals no planning, plus NC, no communication, equals make stuff up. And that probably guarantees that all or portion of that property is going to be removed from family ownership and from the current land use. It's going to be parcelized. And once things are parcelized, it's very hard and very rare for it to be put back together. And it's important that we as professionals acknowledge this is difficult, it's not fun, and it's important. We're talking about water quality, watering systems or whatever. You put all the best conservation practices in place, but if that doesn't last to the next generation, then what have we accomplished long term? Yes, this can be complicated, and you don't have to understand it all. Say, you're in the conversation. I don't understand all this stuff. But I do know that, that it's important to step into and to give it an effort. It's important to frame it for the landowners. We've already discussed some, that there's a difference between estate planning and succession planning. Actually, we're trying to use the word legacy planning now. So the estate planning distributes assets. The legacy planning is an ongoing process. It's engaging the family, the next generation, and the next generation on a continual basis, so that this becomes part of the family dynamic, part of the conversation. And succession planning does include more than just that will or that LLC tool or whatever legal tools a landowner may use. So what are we conserving? So this kind of conversation, legacy planning, should be part of every effort that involves any other aspects of conservation, because we're conserving not only the resource, but the families. We've got a lot of stories, heard a lot of stories about people who have their families are together in part because there is this land that keeps them together. It's a place. It's got a legacy that gives them a sense of identity. And that's really rich. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about working in this arena is that it's not only impacting the resource, but also impacting families. And so we can encourage and challenge our constituents, our landowners, our clients to engage the family in management activities and in planning. If it's just one person in the family that's always doing this stuff, engaging the spouse, engaging some of the children, and those is a great way to start this. Recreation, make sure that it's not all work, that it's fun. Have some close friends who started inviting the nephews and nieces and their families out to the farm one day. They don't have any fancy infrastructure. They just went to the river with fishing poles, chairs, and a little, you know, portable cooker, and spent the day on the river. And that became an annual tradition and connected a generation with that property that didn't already have a connection. So finding ways to start these conversations, having fun, making sure to listen, and being patient. It's not a quick process. And in fact, it's a continual process. We also want to recommend to professionals to build their team. Obviously, that includes estate planning attorneys, but it also includes CPAs, perhaps a financial advisor, and it may include you. Not that you're necessarily sitting around the table, you know, physically with all these other people, but you are part of the team, or a consulting, someone in the private realm, a consultant is part of their team, someone that they work with, they can help that next generation be a connection point for the management of that land is key, okay? And so I would also just tender to all of us that this is a part of our professional legacy. If we think this is important, how well do we know our clients? Do we know about their children? Do we have an idea of what they want for their children? And so we can ask questions and we can inspire and inform them. And I have always liked this quote. We can, you know, tell people we care a lot about stuff, but they don't really care how much we know until they know how much we care. So this is not to brag on the program per se, although I am very proud of this program. It's a joint partnership with Virginia Department of Forestry and Extension and the various other partners that support local efforts as well. But the point of this slide and the next slide is that we can move the needle on this difficult topic by simply working at it, making it part of conversations. This reflects the impact that our face-to-face or virtual programs that we did this year have had, that people are saying, yes, this information is going to help me keep the property in the family and keep it, in our case, in woodland. And we do a follow-up with them 3 or 6 months later, and most of them have begun planning. That's significant. One of the big hurdles for people is how to get started. And so once they've started, there's a good chance that they will continue. And so while 100,000 acres is not much in the context of all of Virginia, that's a lot for certain areas, for certain families, and we can double, triple, quadruple this quickly by all of us incorporating this into our conversations. So let's talk about this a little bit. It'd be best if we were in a room, we could have some back and forth, but here's some questions. So here's the next set of questions. You can answer A, B, C, or D in the chat. What should be part of every conservation discussion? A, mixed drinks. B, questions about legacy. C, a prediction of when they will buy the farm. Or D, political arguments. That's popular these days, right? So what would you say? A, B, C, or D? All right. Teachers' pets out there, love it. Thank you. Waiting for someone. Oh, there we go. A B and then followed by mixed drinks. That could work. It's after hours. All right. Next question. Who is in the best position to instigate legacy planning conversations with landowners? Is it the attorney? Is it the kids? Is it policymakers? Or is it us? A, B, C, or D? Neutral outsiders are really valuable. That's right. And I think that's exactly why it is, I would tender that the answer is D, it's us. We are respected in the communities. We don't have anything to gain directly by it, like an attorney does. You know, they have these attorneys that will have, hey, come to the hotel room, and we'll, I'll give you a presentation. Of course, they're hoping for business, which that's fine too. But as a starting point, we are probably the best position to do that. 3 more quick questions. What's the best way to initiate a conversation on this topic? Tell them they're going to die, ask a relevant natural question, tell them how much land might be sold to develop by the next generation, or it's not our place. Not gonna ask a question. A, B, C, or D. All right, I'm glad to see some B's in there. Some of you may still be struggling with this, thinking, I don't know if it's really my place, and that's okay. Keep struggling. And I hope that you find a way to accommodate it. Who would you advise to be part of the legacy planning team? If you're talking to a landowner, which of this list would you tell them to connect with to be part of their legacy planning team? Yes, don't discount the role that you play as a resource professional in their team. And in fact, offering to be part of that team is probably a good way to help them go ahead and get that assembled. They already have one person. All right, so last question for you today. As a result of this past 50 minutes that we spent together, are you any more likely to initiate a conversation on this with a landowner? 5 choices there. And I really appreciate you engaging with this topic and putting in some chat there. And I hope that there's been some helpful pieces come out of this. Real quick, as we wrap this up, let's do this. And Bill mentioned this publication. We're going to have some companion pieces to this, a little booklet that this is free to access electronically. We're going to print some copies. But we're going to have a cheap little booklet that's available as well that we hope can be distributed far and wide more easily. There's a website. We've got a lot of good stuff on the website. We have videos. I don't know if we'll have, I was going to show a little video, but rather than show that, I'll just point you to that website and leave the last 10 minutes for any questions and answers. And if we end up staring at each other, then I can show a video. So with that, Kathy, I don't know if you want to invite people to unmute their mics to ask questions or to put in the chat, or how you'd like to handle that, but we're ready.
There's no questions in the chat right now. Kathy, I don't want to step on your thunder. Actually, we just got a question. Kathy, did you want to ask it?
I see it.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, so thank you. When is it appropriate to discuss something like legacy planning? You know, it's a good question. Part of me wants to say anytime, but the reality is being sensitive to, and this happens so much easier when you're next to someone in the field. Like anything, look for an opening. And I've had discussions that I looked for an opening and stepped into it, and it went really well. From there, they're like, oh, thank you for bringing this up. I know I need to do something. I've also had discussions where I found an opening, I brought it up, they weren't ready to go there. That's fine. Turn and keep going in the, whatever direction. So I think if, you have a relationship with someone, there's probably a lot of appropriate times to bring it up. Bill or Andrew, if you guys want to chime in, but especially if there are people discussing conservation easements or these other tools, then certainly bring it up there.
When we're working on forest management plans, we're often talking about something that's going to take 50 years to accomplish, and that is always an opening to bring up, who's gonna do this, or should we talk to anyone else and bring someone else in, or what are you planning?
Along those lines too, when you're out and about and you're doing cost share projects for farmers and landowners, I mean, all those practices have a life expectancy. Most of them you have to maintain them for X number of years. So, I mean, it kind of gives you the opportunity to ask, who's going to help you take care of this in the future, or who's going to be here to help make sure they are maintained. And there's real no great answer to your question, but that's one way of working it in is, their life expectancies, and there are also contractual requirements that come back to, due to the tax incentives or due to the tax breaks that they get for these practices and things like that. They are legally and financially bound to maintain these practices for X number of years. Even if the land changes hands to someone else, the new owners have to maintain them, or there's some money that has to be paid back. So there's opportunities probably in the life expectancy of some of your practices that you could work some of that in.
That's good. Thank you, Bill and Andrew. Very good points. And I see Bill Perry also made a great point. People love to talk about their families. Perfect. Exactly. Thank you, Bill. And I've got a quick, I see some other good questions coming in. I just wanted to mention that the publication that has been mentioned, that was a fully joint effort between the Department of Forestry and Extension. So while it's an Extension publication in that it's published through Extension, it was written by Virginia Department of Forestry and Extension folks. So let's see here. A resource list. Good question for CPAs, estate planners, etc. No, not exactly. Andrew can probably chime in a little bit. We have done some planning, some programming with attorneys, and we'd like to develop that list. And it's something that we have kind of on our wish list to be able to do. Andrew, you might have something to chime in with the conservation easement end of things.
Yeah, we can informally let them know about some people who specialize in this, but as a state employee, it's hard to endorse we don't endorse people, and we definitely don't want to guarantee that you talk to this person, you'll get good results, because the minute we do that, they'll get horrible results and try to sue all of us or something. So, we don't, but we sending them to, me, or having those relationships in your own community, and letting them know, here's some people that do this, that are if you're near Lynchburg and there's a couple, you can, the one advice we give them is to not use the phone book to get a lawyer, or don't search the internet to get a lawyer. That is probably the absolute worst way to go about doing that. So we also give them that advice as well.
And we have a section in the publication that talks about finding professionals as well. Give some tips, just like Andrew mentioned. And I see a question that was asked about stewardship plans, and that was answered by Drew. Thank you, Drew. And let's see here. Saw something. Oh, Marta, you asked about who leads legacy planning workshops. Well, we do. DOF and Extension, and we target woodland owners. Extension is ramping up to do more for agricultural producers as well. And Farm Credit has done a fair amount as well. That's who I know of in Virginia that's been doing these workshops. All righty. Sharon, I don't understand who will give volume value estimates. Are you talking about timber?
Yes, I was talking about it in the old stewardship plans from way back. They used to do the stewardship plan, and they would give you volume logging information and estimates. And I know they don't do that anymore, but who does that? Who includes that as part of the plan? And are there lists of good consultants? Because that's always a problem, is you don't want to get somebody that's going to take advantage of a forestry owner. You want a list of consultants that are on the up and up and have a good history of working in with private landowners.
Bill, Andrew, one of you guys want to take that?
Yeah, I don't mind. if someone is asking about how can I cut my timber and how can I find out more about it, I would recommend they call the Department of Forestry first. And, you know, having one of our area foresters come out to the property will not cost them anything just to have that meeting and go out to the property. And if, you know, we will take a look at what they've got briefly, and if it looks like something that would actually be commercially viable timber harvest, then that's what all of our guys have all of our area foresters have a list of the consultants that cover that area. Whether or not there are the worst guys on the list mixed in with the best guys, I think most of our foresters will handle that tactfully, or start at the top of the list and work your way down, or you know, in a way that is ethical, or, you know, not breaking our public trust, or, you know, there are going to be some people on the list maybe that aren't the best, but talking to our guys is a good place to start.
Yeah, I would echo that comment too. Talk to the local Department of Forestry person. You know, you can sometimes help weed out who may not be that good at it by simply just asking. Some of the consultants may not like to do planning work because it may not pay near as much as selling timber and that kind of thing. So just ask good, pertinent questions you would any contractor you're trying to determine how straight up and honest they're being with you. Just ask around. Also ask your neighbors. Somebody asked earlier, how do you find a good attorney to help with estate planning and legacy planning stuff? I would suggest that, you know, if you're dealing with a farm or, you know, a farm family, if they have a good CPA that they do work with, it's just like getting tax work done. Anybody can do it, but some CPAs are much better at farm and timber taxes than others. But if the landowners who need help have a good relationship with a CPA, their CPA may know someone who does really good or who would be better at doing estate planning work as an attorney's perspective. So that would be, you know, it's kind of referral to get a referral from someone else. But if they have a good, honest working relationship or a good CPA that they've done business with for years that they trust, that's someone they could ask about it.
There's a question here about does the booklet or, you know, the new publications, you know, more, I would say it's even more than a booklet. It is long, and it is its own book, and it does include advice on how to talk to an attorney to choose one. We interview them, you know, and the same way you would if you were hiring a forestry consultant or a realtor, or, you know, it has that kind of advice.
The other thing is, I mentioned the videos. We've got a YouTube channel, Preparing for Generation Next, and we have an attorney one, Generation Next Attorney Perspective, and Julie King is the attorney there, and she talks about how to shop for an attorney and this kind of thing too. So the videos are great, and would be also a great way for families to, you know, start the conversation perhaps. So go check that out. It's linked to from the website. Looks like it's 10 o'clock.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on today, guys, and to Adam, Bill, and Andrew for presenting, and Kathy from the Employees Association. Great collaboration, appreciate it. We're done on time, which is perfect. If you have any more questions, I will send out the agenda from today, a link to the recording, and I might send that YouTube link as well, just for ease. So look out for that. I'll take care of sending out the CEU information to DCR, so don't worry about that. And their contact information is on that agenda that I'll send out, so feel free to reach out with them with any questions.
And thank you so much to everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.